And we're back for episode 3.2. Our episode begins with Bran having a dream about the three-eyed raven. He tries to kill the three-eyed raven along with his brothers, but then Jojen Reed arrives. Jojen says you can't kill the raven, because the raven is you. Dun dun dun! Or he's an old man in a cave. Now Bran's story in the third book also opens with him having dreams, but it's about him being Summer. Jojen is already with Bran, and he warns Bran that Summer's personality is taking over Bran's. Keep in mind, before A Song of Ice and Fire, much of George R. R. Martin's writing was about the concept of blended consciousness. Bran and Summer's minds are telepathically linked. Bran is becoming more wolf-like and aggressive, while Summer is likely becoming more intelligent. But in this merging, it seems, one personality will dominate. Now Bran does eventually win his battle with Summer, but it seems that Rickon is losing his battle with Shaggy Dog. But speaking of Rickon, in the book he and Osha have disappeared from our story. They are supposedly crossing the north and heading to the Isle of Skagos, and are currently being followed by Theon's squire, Wex. Now next we get this extra scene of Robb and his wife being lovey-dovey, and then Roose Bolton cockblocks Robb and has bad news. Catelyn's father, Hoster Tully, is dead. Now in the book, Catelyn's been dealing with Hoster's sickness for a while. And Hoster definitely has some secrets that we don't know about. He was estranged from both his brother the Blackfish and his daughter Lysa, and of course both of them went off to the Vale. In the book, Catelyn is with Hoster up until his death. Hoster is delirious and absolutely obsessed with Lysa. He keeps ranting about Lysa and blood and Trueborn's sons, and he keeps saying Tansy. Now Catelyn at first thinks Tansy might be a woman, but Cat eventually figures out that Hoster is feeling guilty about an abortion that he forced on Lysa. Lysa even reveals later that her abortion was from Tansy T, and she's especially upset because her pregnancy was from the love of her life, Littlefinger. Now this mystery is particularly odd in that it was so easy. A significant amount of time is spent on the mystery, but our protagonist figures it out, and Lysa confirms it. All in the same book. The mystery is almost too easy, as if there's something more, but it's never brought up in any future books. Now on top of Hoster's death, Robb also gives the bad news that Bran and Rickon are missing. Now at this point in the book, Robb and Cat think Bran and Rickon are dead. In fact, Cat was told this in the last book, and it's one of the primary reasons why she let Jaime Lannister go. Now next we have this extra scene of Theon getting tortured. Theon actually doesn't appear in A Storm of Swords at all. We only once hear of Theon when Robb is sent some skin in the mail from Ramsay. With Theon disappearing and Theon's father dying in the third book, one is almost led to believe that the Ironborn plot is wrapping up. But instead the Ironborn plot explodes in the fourth and the fifth books. Now meanwhile in the Riverlands, Brienne and Jaime are bickering, and then Brienne watches Jaime pee, and then they bicker some more about Renly. Now in the book, Jaime, Brienne, and Sir Cleos arrive at an inn that's built at the spot where the King of the North knelt to Aegon the Conqueror. The inn now, though, is controlled by the Brotherhood Without Banners. The trio finds the inn kind of sketchy, and so they move on. They just barely miss Arya, who arrives at the inn a short time later. Now here in the show we have this extra plot where a commoner spots them and Brienne lets him go, thinking he's harmless. Meanwhile back in King's Landing, we get some extra scenes with Joffrey and Cersei, where Cersei tries to convince Joffrey that Margaery is a schemer. Joffrey says a bunch of sexist things, but does seem to take Cersei's advice to heart. And then we get an extra scene with Sansa and Shae, where Shae tells Sansa to beware of Littlefinger. Now next we get a very interesting scene between Sansa and Loras. Now back in the first season in the first book, Loras gives Sansa a red rose at the hand's tourney. And there's all sorts of weird parallels between this and when Rhaegar gave a crown of blue roses to Lyanna at the Harrenhal tourney. These parallels are strong enough that Littlefinger approaches Sansa immediately after and mentions that Cat was his Queen of Beauty once and then storms off. Now this is what's interesting. In both book and show, Loras claims he doesn't remember giving Sansa the rose. And in the book, Sansa is puzzled because she was sure that the event was something meaningful. Now maybe Loras is lying, or maybe he's just unaware that the event was meaningful, but our author is introducing the idea that certain events that seem meaningful aren't necessarily meaningful at all. If Sansa's red rose has no meaning, then perhaps Lyanna's blue rose doesn't have any meaning either. In fact, George R. R. Martin has another novel called Dying of the Light, where the protagonist has a pet name for his ex-girlfriend, Jenny. He thinks the name is filled with special meaning, but it turns out his ex-girlfriend never liked it. It wasn't a special name between them at all. It was all in his head. What's funny is that Littlefinger used to play Jenny of Oldstones with Cat, and he thought the two had a very special bond as well, one that was completely in his head since Cat had no feelings for Littlefinger. And this all comes full circle as Jenny of Oldstones also had flowers in her hair like Lyanna's blue rose crown. The point of all of this is our author is well aware that the human brain weaves fiction, and it especially does this with regards to love. Now in our next scene, Sansa goes to eat with Margaery and her grandmother, Olenna Redwyne. Now in case you didn't know, Olenna is played by Diana Rigg, who was Tracy Bond, Emma Peel from The Avengers, and Lady Holiday from The Great Muppet Caper. Now in the book, this scene is ironically set in the Maiden Vault. The Maiden Vault was a room in which King Baelor the Blessed locked up his sisters so no one could have sex with them. It's within a room synonymous with the oppression of women that these women choose to conspire. And it's very clear that the seeds of Joffrey's murder are sown in this scene. Now here, Lady Olenna wants the skinny on Joffrey, and Sansa tells her that he's a monster. Now just in case the Maiden Vault didn't have enough symbolism about oppression, in the book this scene happens while a fool is singing The Bear and the Maiden Fair, a song about rape. Now next we have an extra scene of Robb and Rickard Karstark talking about the war. He of course is unhappy with Robb's marriage, as is Cat. Now here Cat tells an interesting story about Jon Snow that's not in the book. She claims that when Jon was a baby, she prayed for Jon to die. Then by coincidence, Jon did get sick, so Catelyn prayed for him to get better. And she told the gods if Jon does get better, she'll love him. Of course she goes back on this promise, and now she thinks that she's being punished for it. Now in the book, Catelyn doesn't seem to have much guilt about Jon Snow. She just hates him. Meanwhile, north of the Wall, we get this extra scene with Mance giving a background on the wildlings, and then we meet Orell. Orell is a wildling skin changer who can go into his eagle. In the book, Jon has already killed Orell back when he ambushed Ygritte's party. Orell is living a second life as an eagle and absolutely hates Jon. Now this all gets back to blended consciousness. Orell's mind and the eagle's mind have merged into one. And later, a different wildling skin changer named Varamir Sixskins takes control of the eagle, and he talks about Orell's consciousness seeping into his. Elsewhere north of the Wall, Sam is having a tough time with the march back to the Wall, and our Chet stand-in Rast, yes his name is Rast, taunts Sam. Sam collapses and wants to be left to die, but Ed and Gren return to help Sam up. Now in the book, it's only Sam's subconscious that taunts him, and it's a huge man named Small Paul who actually saves Sam. Small Paul actually picks up and carries Sam. This is curious as, 1, Sam is enormously heavy, and 2, Small Paul was part of Chet's conspiracy that planned on murdering Sam. Now this may seem like a contradiction, but it's actually not. You see, Small Paul is an idiot. He joins Chet's conspiracy because he thinks he'll get a pet raven out of it, and he carries Sam for the same reason. Still, it's awfully strange that someone is willing to murder people and carry a 300-pound object through the snow for a raven. Is there any logic to Small Paul's actions? It's hard to say, but it should be noted that Hodor is also an idiot and happens to be susceptible to telepathic intrusions. These intrusions frighten Hodor, but Small Paul may have a different opinion of them. I bring this up because ravens are often the telepathic vessels of Children of the Forest and Bloodraven. Now next we are treated to an extra scene where Jojen and Meera introduce themselves to Bran. In the book, the Reeds have been with Bran for a while now, since the Harvest Feast back in the middle of the last book. In both book and show, Jojen does not fear summer, so it seems fairly clear that whoever has been sending dreams to Jojen is aligned with whoever sent the wolves to Bran, and they very well may be the same person. Now in our next scene, Arya, Gendry, and Hot Pie are heading towards Riverrun when they run into the Brotherhood Without Banners. Oof, the Brotherhood Without Banners is chock-filled with secrets and puzzling characters. They were formed back in the first book and first season when Eddard sent a band of men to kill the Mountain after suspicious killings occurred in the Riverlands. Then the party was attacked by the Mountain, and now they have become Robin Hood-like outlaws. I could go on and on about each member of their band, but in summary, I think they have sympathies with the Targaryens and the Blackfyres. Now next we get an extra scene between Shae and Tyrion, where Shae feigns jealousy and accuses Tyrion of fancying Sansa. Interestingly, in the book the jealousy game goes the other way. Tyrion spots Shae flirting with knights and spending time with a singer named Simon Silvertongue. Keep in mind, romantic jealousy is a huge aspect of George R. R. Martin's previous work. Tyrion's jealousy leads to some interesting places in the future, including Tyrion's eventual murder of Tywin. Now next we get an extra scene where Margaery tries to relate to Joffrey by claiming she's a dumb woman who also likes killing. In the book we actually have little idea if Joffrey and Margaery ever got along. Probably not. And then we get an extra scene with Theon's torture and the introduction of Ramsay. Obviously in the book, Ramsay was a huge part of Theon's downfall at Winterfell. Like Satan, he plays the role of tempter, manipulator, and eventual torturer. Here in the show, he's just a torturer. Now in our next scene, Jojen and Bran are talking about Greensight and warging. Now, show Jojen is much more direct with Bran than book Jojen is. Book Jojen goes through a long process of first getting Bran to admit that he has dreams, and then trying to convince Bran that his dreams come true. And in doing so, convince Bran that he needs to go north of the Wall and find the Three-Eyed Crow. It's the Three-Eyed Crow that will provide the real answers. Show Jojen has jumped right into explaining Bran's abilities and future abilities. Now next we find ourselves back with Arya and the Brotherhood Without Banners at the Inn of the Kneeling Man, where they've just missed Jaime and Brienne. Now in this scene the Hound is brought in and he's the one that outs Arya. But in the book, Arya's identity is discovered by Harwin, a member of the Brotherhood whose father was Master of Horse at Winterfell. Arya initially thinks that the discovery of Harwin is her salvation, but she eventually realizes that Harwin is loyal to the Brotherhood and not her. The Brotherhood realizes they have a great asset, but they aren't sure what to do with her, so they decide to leave it up to their leader, Beric Dondarrion. So Arya and the Brotherhood go off on a long wandering quest to find Beric. And in our final scene, Brienne and Jaime are wandering and end up in a sword fight. Now in the book, their third companion, Cleos Frey, is shot by some arrows by a mysterious party that runs off. Jaime uses the distraction to grab Cleos' sword, and so begins the fight. Now here in the show we find that Commoner has turned in Jaime and Brienne to a Bolton crony named Locke. In the book, Jaime and Brienne are found by the Brave Companions, the traitorous sellsword company that left the Lannisters and joined the Northern cause. And that's all for episode 3.2. See you in episode 3.3.